It's a quiet night in Sydney, the kind of night where the air feels still, almost too still, as if something terrible is about to happen. A young woman is walking home, alone. She's just finished a long day at work, completely unaware that the next few minutes will be the last peaceful moments of her life. She doesn't know that 5 men are watching her, waiting for their moment to strike. What happened to Anita Cobby on that fateful night in 1986 is something that no one could forget. It's a story of horror, violence, and unimaginable cruelty. But even more than that, it's a story about how evil can lurk anywhere, even in the most familiar places. Welcome to Bloodspot, where today we're unraveling the heartbreaking case of Anita Cobby, a case that shattered a nation and left the world wondering, how could this happen? Before we dive into the dark details, let's first meet Anita. Born on November 2nd, 1959, Anita Lynette Cobby wasn't just another name in the headlines. She was a daughter, a sister, and a wife. Growing up in Sydney, Australia, Anita was the kind of person everyone gravitated toward. She was a beauty queen, no really. She was crowned Miss Western Suburbs in 1979, a fact that adds an eerie irony to her tragic fate. But Anita wasn't just about her looks. She was intelligent, kind-hearted, and had a deep desire to help others. Naturally, this led her to become a nurse at Sydney's Concord Repatriation General Hospital. Her colleagues adored her, describing her as compassionate and endlessly patient. And those qualities weren't limited to her work life. Anita had a strong relationship with her family, especially her parents, Grace and Gary Lynch. Even though Anita had recently faced some problems with her husband, John Cobby, the two remained very close. They were considering getting back together and starting over. Anita was a woman with her whole life ahead of her. But as we often see in true crime, it's when you least expect it that darkness strikes. Anita's disappearance. On February 2nd, 1986, after a long day at work and catching up with friends, Anita was just looking to get home. She boarded a train at Central Station, heading towards her hometown of Blacktown. The plan was simple. She'd get off the train, walk home, and call it a night. But life has a cruel way of altering even the most innocent of plans. When Anita got off the train at Blacktown Station, she decided to walk home, a decision many of us might make without thinking twice. It was only 9:30 p.m., a little late, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary. But as she began her walk, she unknowingly attracted the attention of a group of men who were prowling the area, looking for trouble. This wasn't an accident. They were hunting. Anita's final moments of freedom came to an abrupt end when a white Holden Kingswood pulled up next to her. Inside the car were 5 men, and these weren't ordinary men. They were criminals with a thirst for violence. What happened next? Anita was grabbed, forced into the car, and taken on a terrifying drive that would lead her to her brutal end. The horrific discovery. For 2 days, Anita's family and friends searched frantically for her. They knew something was wrong, but no one could have predicted just how wrong it was. On February 4th, 1986, Anita's body was found in a remote paddock in Prospect, a suburb not far from Blacktown. But this wasn't just a case of someone being killed in a robbery gone wrong. The sheer brutality of her death shook the nation. Anita had been severely beaten and tortured. Her injuries were so horrific that even the police officers who found her were left traumatized. She had been sexually assaulted and savagely mutilated. Her throat had been slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. The sheer rage and violence of the attack made it clear. This wasn't just about a quick kill. This was personal, cruel, and sadistic. The public was outraged. But more than anything, they wanted answers. Who could be capable of such a horrific crime, and why Anita? The investigation. With the crime scene yielding few immediate clues, police were left grasping for leads. What they did know was that this was not the work of a single person. The level of violence, the sheer brutality of the assault. It was clear that more than one individual had been involved. The media exploded with coverage and tips began flooding in. Everyone in Australia seemed to be on edge, terrified that the men responsible could strike again. Then, a small but crucial break in the case came when a witness reported seeing a car near the area where Anita had disappeared. The car was a white Holden Kingswood, and it wasn't long before police were able to track down its owner. And this is where John Travers comes into play. John Travers wasn't working alone. He was the ringleader of a gang made up of Michael and Gary Murphy, along with their brother Leslie and Michael Murdoch. This group of men had long criminal histories, though nothing on their rap sheets could have predicted the violence they were capable of that night. What makes this gang particularly terrifying is their almost casual cruelty. To them, Anita wasn't a person. She was prey. They had been out that night, aimlessly looking for someone to rob, to attack, to humiliate. And when they spotted Anita walking alone, she became their target. They abducted her, forced her into their car, and drove her to a remote area. What followed was an unspeakable assault, a torture session where each man took turns inflicting pain, both physical and emotional. Anita's final hours were nothing short of hell. But even among this group, John Travers was the most depraved. It was he who ultimately killed her. It was Travers who pulled out a knife and slashed her throat, sealing her fate. The arrests and confessions. After the car lead, police quickly zeroed in on Travers and his associates. The walls were closing in on the wolf pack, and soon they began to turn on each other. The final nail in their coffin came when Travers, under pressure from his aunt who had turned informant, confessed to the murder. He described the crime in chilling detail, with no remorse. His casual retelling of the events shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Soon, the other members of the group were arrested. The Murphy brothers and Michael Murdoch tried to downplay their involvement, but the evidence against them was damning. There was no escaping the consequences of their heinous actions. By the time they were brought to trial, the public's outrage had reached a fever pitch. People wanted justice, and they wanted it fast. Justice for Anita. In March of 1987, all 5 men were convicted of the murder of Anita Cobby. The court showed no leniency. John Travers, the Murphys, and Murdoch were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a rare and severe sentence in Australia. The judge in the case, Justice Alan Maxwell, didn't hold back in his sentencing. He said, and I quote, "I believe that this is the worst example of capital murder to come before this court. For many, this was justice. But for Anita's family, no sentence could ever heal the pain of losing their daughter in such a cruel, senseless way." The impact of the case. The murder of Anita Cobby had a profound impact on Australia. It was one of those rare cases that didn't just affect the victim's family, but the entire nation. It sparked conversations about violence, about the protection of women, and about the punishment for such crimes. In the wake of Anita's death, several advocacy groups were formed, dedicated to helping victims of violent crime. Anita's parents, Grace and Gary Lynch, became powerful voices in this movement, ensuring that their daughter's death would not be in vain. The legacy of this case also led to more stringent security measures in Australian cities, as public outcry demanded safer streets for women. Yet despite the changes, the question remains, how do you stop evil like this? Can you? So now that you know the horrific details of this case, do you think justice was truly served? Is a life sentence enough for the men who took Anita's life in such a brutal way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found today's story gripping, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and join the Bloodspot community. Together, we'll continue exploring the world's most chilling mysteries, one story at a time. Until next time, stay safe and watch your back.